I have to tell you two things before I deliver this address. The first thing is it's 75 degrees in Atlanta. Right, that's the first thing. So, I woke up this morning and I said, oh, hell no, this is crazy. The second thing is I come from an HBCU, Clark Atlanta University. And at an HBCU, when a speaker speaks, the crowd talks back, right? I'm not used to other places where people are very polite and very kind, but very silent. I don't really know how to do that. And especially because you all got me up at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? I'm gonna certainly need your help, but I am absolutely glad to be here. And I want to really tell you, I'm really in the middle of book touring for Isaac's Song, and I'm happy about it. But when I heard this topic, I said, oh, no, I have to go. I have to go. Because anything that has to do with the possibility that enslaved people might get to speak, I rush to be present. Because, yes. Because it's been a long time coming since my ancestors have had a chance to open their mouths. And it made me think, what in the world were those people, these ancestors of William and Mary, thinking when they were standing outside the rooms waiting as their enslaved captors were sitting inside thinking they were becoming educated, right? Just kind of made me think about that. So I put together a little something creative to share with you. The question is, what would the ancestors say? And I fell on one thing that I think the ancestors would say, and that is, you don't need permission to have a revolution. See, someone thought they were going to destroy Black people. They came all the way to Africa to capture the best of us. They murdered elders and children with the aim of confiscating resources and separating families. They believed in their hearts that if they did this, Black people would be too fractured to survive. They convinced themselves that if they transported half the people halfway around the world, neither half would ever prosper. They told each other that these people were weak and fragile and inferior and unintelligent and frail and feeble and ugly and undesirable and unholy and unfit for God's glory. They wrote books that spoke of Africans as uncivilized and primitive and substandard and illiterate and ignorant. They made jokes about coarse, kinky, nappy hair and large, flat, massive noses and big, wide, flat feet and round, large, bulbous behinds. These other people called African spiritual systems witchcraft and devil worship and voodoo and wizardry and black magic. They called Africans niggers and colors and blacks and Negroes and every other name that meant the opposite of purity and divinity. They packed Africans on boats and sent them around the world. But first they scattered them throughout the Atlantic Ocean like a farmer planting seed. They fed our ancestors' bodies to sharks and never thought about the anger the waters inhabited. Since then, hurricanes swirl annually, trying to tell the world that somebody threw Black saviors into the water. But since Africans and since most Americans don't read, they miss the sign. Black people miss it too, I'm afraid. See, these captors took Black bodies and set them up on auction blocks. They sold them like meat at a market, per ounce, per pound, per glistening Black form. They touched them to see which ones they wanted. They imagined in their sordid hearts the sexual ecstasy these Black bodies might solicit. They chose particular African men and women whose bodies they admired. They didn't capture everyone. They took the ones they thought could work and satisfy their sinister lust. But most of all, they believed the strength of Africa was over, that it was done, that it would be no more. They concluded that their rape of Mother Africa was complete, total, all-embracing, a done deal. But y'all, you don't need permission to have a revolution. They didn't know whom the hell they had captured. They didn't know that Africans are actually stronger in death than in life. They didn't know that a seed will bloom wherever you plant it. They didn't know that actually they came to Africa to find their Savior. They didn't know, they didn't understand that we fell in love with Jesus, not because we needed a Savior, but because we too were saviors. And we knew the rules of resurrection. See, you don't need permission to have a revolution. They didn't know that if they changed our names, that they'd change our story. See, they thought that if they gave us their names, we would no longer be ourselves. They thought that if Olufemi and Abena and Alatanga and Chisanganda and Daye and Akili and Bataraishe and Kamathi and Binta and Kwame and Kunta, if they became Sally and Elamay and Joe and Charles and Betty, I'm talking to somebody this morning, and Frank and Louis and Jane, they thought that those folks would have no strength. They didn't know whom the hell they had captured. They didn't know that our spirits were bigger than our names. They didn't know that we loved character before we loved Christ. They didn't know that we take their language and create our own nicknames, Cookie and Pookie and Lil Bit and Big Mama and Pumpkin and Nana. In other words, we turned their language upside down, inside out, until it said what the hell we wanted it to say, until we articulated what we meant in our beautiful Black hearts. They thought that if they paid money for our flesh, they actually owned us. These people really believe that. They thought that if they sold babies away from screaming mothers' arms, they could defeat us. They really believed that if they held Black fathers back as they fought like cornered lions, they had crushed us. They actually convinced themselves that if they beat us long enough, hard enough, harshly enough, we'd stop fighting. Well, they were wrong. They didn't know whom the hell they had captured. See, what they didn't know is that we knew God before we knew them. We understood the movement of the skies. We studied astrology and astronomy. We invented geometry and trigonometry and the calculus. We spoke to ancestors across time and space. We understood the difference between the brain and the mind. We knew the difference between the soul and the spirit. We understood the difference between life and living. They didn't strip us of Africa. They stripped us of artifacts. Everything that is Africa is within us. Kente cloth is not Africa. The ability to weave it is what's African. Come on, somebody. Dancing is not Africa. Dancing polyrhythmically is Africa. Doing hair is not African. Doing cornrows is African. But we do all of that here. Don't you understand? Don't you see it? In other words, the children who left home are as African as the children who stayed behind. This is how in a new land, you still get call and response. You still get the polyrhythms of the drum. We call it jazz and gospel. You still get the storytelling tradition in music. We call it hip hop. You don't need permission to have a revolution. Pass me your water, Joanne. Somebody really thought that by bringing us here, we'd be less than we were. We're actually far more. Instead of weaving cloth, we piece quilts. Instead of beating drums, we stomped the earth. Instead of fufu and couscous, we made dressing and succotash. Come on, somebody. Instead of dancing Manjani and Sorsene, we did the Dougie, the cakewalk, the Charleston, the Lindy Hop, the Smurf, the Lock, the Pop, the Crump. Instead of mothers wrapping their hair in cloth, our mothers wore church hats that you had better not touch. In other words, everything we had in Africa, we made in America. We simply had to transmute and synthesize material. They didn't know they'd brought people all the way across the Atlantic who knew that if you couldn't find a way, just make one. We are the way makers, the dream shakers, the heavy load sharers, the mighty spirit carriers. They didn't know whom the hell they captured. Listen, the worst mistake they made was to steal seeds of Africa and breed them. Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother. His water is holier. See, they didn't know that if you breed seeds of Africa and bring them to a bondage where we govern the soil. Listen, if you're going to steal seeds, don't give them to the farmer. Come on, you'll get that in 1 minute. We understood the agreement between the earth and the rain and the wind and the sun, and we knew the agreement would be honored anywhere on this planet. Listen, you don't need permission to have a revolution. Somebody really thought they were going to destroy Black people. They thought the invasion of Africa would do it. Then they thought that the Middle Passage would do it. Then they thought that throwing half of us into the ocean would do it. Then they thought that selling us on auction blocks would do it. Then they thought that beating us would do it. Then they thought that separating our families would do it. Then they thought that raping our bodies would do it. Then they thought that hanging us from trees would do it. Then they thought that denying our rights would do it. Then they thought that making us sharecrop would do it. Then they thought accepting us into the military but paying us nothing would do it. Then they thought that making our women their maids would do it. Then they thought keeping us out of their schools would do it. Then they thought holding us down in the streets would do it. Then they thought putting us in the projects would do it. Then they thought overcharging us in the suburbs would do it. Then they thought calling us niggas would do it. Then they thought killing our men in Vietnam would do it. Then they thought twisting facts into history would do it. Then they thought paying our kids to call themselves niggas would do it. Then they thought that police brutality would do it. Then they thought that making Black people hope to vote but not being able to vote would do it. But I have a secret to tell you, ain't nothing in the world going to destroy Black people, because if you were going to kill Black people, you waited too late. See, every time folks tried to destroy us, God simply sent an angel to cover us. If folks were going to destroy Black people, oh, they waited too long. They missed their chance. They should never have let us sing in those vast fields of cotton. Because see, the minute you let Black people sing, strength comes. See, the minute we're able to pick cotton and sing some glad morning when this life is over. See, if you let us do that, baby, you in trouble. Because if Black people sing, we gonna dance. And if Black people dance, we gonna conjure. And if Black people conjure, the spirit is coming. And when the spirit comes, every pain, every heartache, every difficulty, every loss, every trial, every sorrow, every heartache, every agony, every distress, every despair, every misery, every sadness, every gloom, and every grief shall be replaced with joy unspeakable and power immeasurable and courage inconceivable. And soon the world will see that Africans were sent on a mission around the globe to teach the world that you can destroy leaders, but you cannot destroy hope. You can destroy freedom fighters, but you cannot destroy freedom. You can destroy lovers, but you cannot destroy love. See, what Africans have always known is that you don't need permission to have a revolution. If we keep our eye on the Almighty, if we trust in God with our whole hearts, if we stand for and fight for righteousness when others won't, if we love one another the way God loves us, then the world can do what it pleases, because in the end, God will make the crooked places straight and cause the blind to see and force the deaf to hear, and everyone on the planet shall sit down as the African rises and takes the seat on the right hand of God, the Almighty Mother and Father, as God declares, if you want heaven, you must come by Black people first. See, y'all, the most frightening thing in America is a conscious Black mind. I'm gonna say that again. The most frightening thing in America is a conscious Black mind. Our ancestors, like Mr. Lemon, gave their lives for the right to read and write. They ran hundreds of miles for the freedom to think and conceive their own destiny. They understood that knowledge is power, but they also understood that it wasn't free. It was costly. It was expensive. It was hard earned. It was difficult to acquire. And if America had its way, Black folks would never have had it. But I came here on this early morning to tell you that America didn't have its way. No, 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 it did not. We learned to read when people said we weren't smart enough. We learned to write, and we wrote our own freedom papers. We wrote treaties against our bondage. We wrote narratives about our lives in chains. We literally wrote our way to liberty. See, you've got to understand you don't need permission to have a revolution. We gained our freedom and this government did not agree. We didn't need them to agree. We didn't need others to agree that we were human. We didn't need others to agree that our lives mattered. We didn't need others to tell us we were children of God. We didn't need others' permission for us to believe we deserved equality. We are the descendants of resistance. We have fight in our blood. We have strength in our DNA. It's who we are. Brown versus Board set the legal precedent for Black children to be educated in public schools. But Brown versus Board is not the beginning of Black education in America. Come on, somebody. We've been doing that since we stepped foot in the land of white supremacy. Educating our children is our job, no one else's. Public schools can't do this. They can't tell our children the price we paid for them. No one can tell our sons and daughters of the beauty of their beauty but us. No one can tell them how we dreamed of them while picking cotton. No one can tell them that we were calling their names as we crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge. No one can tell them that we scrubbed floors and cleaned toilets and cooked meals, all with the hope that they wouldn't have to. No one can tell Black children that Black elders wore out knees and voices praying to God to change our situation so Black kids would get their fair share of the American inheritance. No one can tell Black children that we named them after grandmothers and grandfathers, aunties and uncles, because we believed they would inherit that person's strength, that person's fight, that person's will never to faint. No one can tell Black children how marvelous and talented and gifted and resilient and artistic and stunning and beautiful and glorious they are really, but other Black people. It doesn't matter if schools and educational systems refuse to teach Black history. What matters is if Black people refuse to teach it. We've gathered today not to strategize a movement to force others to love us. No, that's not why we're here. We've gathered here today to tell people that whether they love us or not, we're here to stay. We're here to figure out what risks to take, to discover just how bold we are in this fight to save our nation. We don't need any governing body to agree. They didn't agree with Harriet Tubman and she ran anyway. Huh? Come on. They didn't agree with Sojourner Truth and she saved us anyway. They didn't agree with Frederick Douglass, and he wrote books anyway. They didn't agree with Nat Turner or Denmark Vesey or Gabriel Prosser or Nat Turner, and they led rebellions anyway. They didn't agree with Shirley Chisholm or James Baldwin or Zora Neale Hurston or Malcolm or Martin or Medgar or Fannie Lou Hamer or Satchel Paige or Joe Louis or Madam C.J. Walker or Rosa Parks or King or Eunice Johnson or Gwendolyn Brooks or Kwame Nkrumah or Patrice Lumumba or Bayard Rustin or Jesse Owens or Ethel Waters or James Brown or Billie Holiday or Carter G. Woodson or Julian Bond or Charles Hamilton Houston or Thurgood Marshall or Ida B. Wells. They didn't agree with none of them. But they did it anyway. They didn't agree with Bloody Sunday, but it came anyway. They didn't agree with the Harlem Renaissance. Come on, somebody. But it came anyway. They didn't agree with the Black Arts Movement, but it came anyway. They didn't agree with the March on Washington, but it came anyway. They didn't agree with the Black Panther Party feeding all them Black kids, but they did it anyway. They didn't agree with the Holy Ghost either, but it keeps coming anyway. Come on, somebody. See, y'all, the secret to Black agency is for us to know and to teach that America does not have to agree for us to have a revolution. In fact, it's not going to agree, and it's really not going to agree now. But we're going to have it. Absolutely, we're going to have it. That's why you're in this room. If you're not part of the revolution, you're in the wrong place. This is a room of revolutionaries. Come on, somebody. We've gathered today to figure out our role in the revolution. What part will you play? Will you gather books as weapons? Will you sit children at your feet and tell them the real story of what happened after we crossed the bridge in 1965? Will you write songs in honor of Jimmy Lee Jackson? Will you create dances that heal a tired, worn, weary people? Will you give money to support the cause? Will you send a Black child to college simply because he or she deserves to go? Will you vote even when you despise both candidates? Will you visit black boys in prison and teach them the black national anthem? Do you even know it yourself? I can't hear nobody in this room. Will you teach black girls that they can own a business as easily as they can do hair? Will you? What will you do? All of us will pray. That's not your only role. We need soldiers in this battle, those who will fight and hang in there and come back tomorrow and believe against the odds and disagree, but love anyway and disobey unrighteousness. We need soldiers who ain't scared of laws and attitudes that attempt to block our way. Our children are worth every effort, every risk. You got to find out your role before the sun goes down today. Get clear of your role in the revolution and get on post and get ready. The angels and the ancestors have assembled. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to write. That's my role. And it is because I write that I stand here today. I write really because I once believed I was ugly, and then I wrote myself into beauty. I write because I hated who I was, and then God told me I was divine, and shame had no place in a divine soul. And so in exchange, I promised God to tell the truth. God, help me today, that we are all gods made in the image of a perfect, marvelous creator. I promise to tell that God is not concerned with flesh and blood, but with spiritual ecstasy shared between the living and the ought to be living. And so with pen and paper, I set about the duty of setting the world free. I write that black won't be ugly one day, that children of every color dance together, exchanging skin in search of God in another color. I write because we rape. I write because we hurt. I write because some pain can't be described. It can only be felt in the marrow of a story or the lyrics of a song. I write for the boy who wanted to be a man but couldn't figure out how, or the girl who dreamed of beauty but was given brilliance instead. I write that they might not give up the fight, that they might know the failure is in others' eyes, not in their beings. It is in others' judgmental hearts, not their sacred difference. I write that they might live, that their stories might be holy and sacred, read by others standing at the cliff, weeping, begging God to change them. And all God says is, hell no. I write to soothe wounds too deep to heal, to love the rejected, to give sight to the willingly blind, to embrace the dismissed and the discarded. I write because precious blood streams from those who can't find God within themselves. In every character, every plot, every description, every image, I seek only to create a world full of gods, gay gods, lesbian gods, ant gods, tree gods, ocean gods, grass gods, elephant gods, but holy gods all, who share powers and kingdoms too secure for laws and limitations. I write that troubled black youth might happen past a mirror, then dance at what they see. I write that elders might know their lives were not in vain. I write to tell gay brothers they're straight too. To shed light on the power of love and everyone's right to have it. Everyone, the brown, the bleak, the blue, the black, the bold, the unsure, the rejoicing, the suffering. I write to announce that without forgiveness, there is no liberty. Its absence is bondage of the spirit, incarceration of the soul. Forgiveness is the only seed of transformation. It ushers you through the wilderness of chaos and pain, bruises and careless apologies, without the weight of empty promises. It teaches you that no one can control your happiness unless you surrender it. I write to give readers permission to take your joy back, to tell the world to kiss your ass if it thinks you're going to die to satisfy other people's outdated, antiquated beliefs. I write so that you can tell the world, no fucking way, when it tries to convince you that you ain't supposed to be free. Come on, somebody. This is why I write. To strengthen the strong and fortify the weak, to sing praises to those who died for those who wouldn't, to pay homage to those who declared, I am black and I am beautiful, long before anybody agreed. To say thank you to men who love and honor women, to bow before women who love and honor men, to applaud the few who love and raise children they did not birth. This is why I write, because we've not seen the fullness of love yet. We've not set it free in our hearts to dance, to sing a lullaby of healing, to walk among our pains until every hurt is a distant memory or a flower in bloom. We've not taken the risk to strip ourselves naked before the world and stand in full confidence of what it beholds. We're not yet sure of our divinity, not yet convinced of our holiness, not yet persuaded that we're worthy of heaven. And until we're clear, I write. And I'm going to write until the wind outsings my pen. I'm going to write until the ocean's tide moans our freedom. I'm going to write until trees walk among us and speak stories of bygone days and people unremembered. If there is no paper, I shall use the wall. If there's no wall, I shall use my hand. If I must relinquish my hand, I shall use the very earth upon which we stand and scratch into the dust the sentiments of liberty. On their travels, some weary one will see the words laid upon the ground, and they will know that their black Redeemer lives. This is why I write. There are triumphant stories to tell, unthinkable testimonies to hear, transformative narratives to discover, stories some don't want to read, but everyone needs to heed, stories that dismantle cathedral walls and set the captives free, stories that celebrate transgendered angels and bisexual prophets, stories of people we threw away who could have saved us, stories of those who came from adverse circumstances yet smile every day, stories of broken hearts, broken promises, broken dreams, broken ribs, broken spirits, stories of victory and achievement against the odds. This is why I write, and I have to write because America lies. It says black men don't love black men, and black children are inherently inferior. It says black women are fussy, naggy, bitchy, needy, shallow, and mouthy. Don't you see the lies? It needs these lies in order to boast itself the best country on the planet. And that too is a lie, although it could be true if America ever admitted who built the damn place. Well, but that, my friend, is just a little too much truth. And so until America loves truth, I write. And I'm going to write for the obese and the anorexic, the joyless and the sorrowful, for the man too anguished to adorn, the woman too forgotten to mend, the child untouched and unpraised. I write for their hearts, their precious, tender hearts. Each word is an invitation to believe a new thing, a different thing, a more marvelous, transformative thing that invites them to remove their mask and exist unashamed. I write because black people are still boasting of good hair and minuscule strains of Indian blood in obviously African veins. I write for those who birthed children, then buried them too soon. Those who love so hard their hearts quiver. I write for those who want to love but trauma disallows. Those who work miracles every day but never get a crown. I write because we're still talking about Jesus as if there's never been another Savior, and we're still praising Jesus for doing things most of us wouldn't do. Yes, I write because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It has come and gone, in fact, so many, many, many times, yet we keep looking for God while we're staring at God. And so I write that we might acquire eyes to see and ears to hear and voices with which to speak. And perhaps then finally we'll discover that together we are the only God there is. But until that day, I write. For imprisoned black souls suffering for crimes they didn't commit. Through words, I send them bird songs of healing, lyrical reminders that the state can house their bodies but not their spirits. I write to reiterate that every great person was once bound, either by the state or themselves, Christ, King, Gandhi, Asada, Malcolm, for fear of what they knew, what they wouldn't do, what they might sacrifice for the world's freedom. I write because my grandfather couldn't. I write because my grandmother could but wouldn't. I write because my brothers can but won't. My sisters can but don't. So ignorance lives in mansions fair on every street of our community, buying real estate in our minds. And still I write. There are more children coming, y'all, more ideas to birth, more words with which to tell stories. My hope is built on the word. It lifts bowed down heads and moves diseases to far corners of the earth. It reconstructs history and gives credit to those who truly paid. It instructs the ill-informed, excites the curious, clarifies the confused, reprimands the trifling, redeems the criminal. The word is life. It is blood in the imagination, food to the starving soul. It is the molecular structure of transformers. This is why I write, to transform the deformed into something so magical, so remarkable, so unthinkable that God smiles and says, yes, 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 my brother, right on. I write to remind us that every day without love is a day wasted. It is a sunrise dishonored, a breathless, lifeless existence that only the unintelligent can endure. I write for the insecure, the inept, the uncertain, the self-doubting, the woefully timid, the thick, the husky, the thin, the tentative, the spiritually paraplegic, the emotionally palsied. Through books, I seek to banish hatred and pursue its antidote. This is why I write. I write to make love to words and phrases that cure pains unspoken and hopes unrealized. I write that everyone can be cuddled and caressed, kissed and intercoursed without begging for another's unwilling flesh. I write to hold the hand of the depressed and the dying, the lonely and the suicidal. Might my words, my commas and conjunctions, improper nouns and irreverent verbs revigorate lives all across this land and cast light where darkness reigns. This is why I write. I have to write, y'all. It is my calling, the price I pay for this breath I breathe. With each stroke of the pen, a soul resurrects and trades mortality for immortality, and life becomes bearable again, even for the scorned and the abused. With each page, some lonesome heart gets the restoration it thought would never come, but it came in a book of 1,000 tongues, teaching the beauty of truth and righteousness. A book both subtle and unsuspecting, flooding the imagination with images and symbols too powerful to ignore. A book sent by the ancestors to ward off self-doubt, self-loathing, and self-degeneration. Yes, 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 yes. This is why I write. I write because I want us all to live. I write because we've crowned someone else our God. We've abandoned our ancestors in exchange for dollars, but no sense. We've deserted dreams because others couldn't comprehend them. We've let daddy's failures and mama's shortcomings define who and what we are. But they, mama and daddy, were only hills and mountains to climb in order to learn how to climb, because heaven is a place. I write that we might make heaven instead of praying for one. I also write to encourage justice to fight on, to know that winning happens in many ways and sometimes without celebration. If justice quits, we all lose. If justice fails, we shall rally behind her and lift her high until the world hears her pleas and righteousness meets her in the air, and together they rain down equality. This is why I write, because we are watchmen of this planet, stewards of mercy and kindness who owe each other unconditional love and a bright, uninhibited good morning. This is why I write. We shall rise one day, y'all, like the sun, and comfort one day, y'all, like an evening breeze, and we shall satisfy one day, y'all, like a shading tree, and we will finally be whatever it is that God has been hiding from us. This is why I write. All you gotta do is read. I'm done, sir.
All right, a round of applause indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, whew, wow. Had to just sit in it for a moment, right?
Yeah.
So we have about,
I noticed your water. You
no, you're fine. It's just lime water. It had a little
Okay,
lime in
well,
it, so it's holy,
Yeah.
So I think we have about 30 minutes, 20 minutes for questions and answers. So we have some time, let's just say that.
Okay.
For Q&A. And we have some people who are going to assist with that. Dr. Allen there. And if we need someone else to run a mic on this side. Okay.
Oh. Oh, yes, ma'am.
It changed who I am.
Yes, ma'am.
Intrinsically. And I can read this group without letting you down. I read that book and I heard your voice.
Oh, my goodness.
And I heard my ancestors.
Yes.
And I heard who I am. And I heard who I'm becoming. And you changed my life. Wow. I am why you write.
Wow. Yes, ma'am.
So much for the word this morning. I'm a pretty kid, so I was there with you.
Yeah.
All these books you have read, which book? Can you tell us about, like, I don't know, maybe your favorite one or one we need to get? I don't know. I don't know.
Well, first, I don't have a favorite book. A favorite book is like naming a favorite child. Right? It's dangerous. But I will tell you, the book I'm always most excited about is the book I'm writing. Right? Once I finish a book, I kind of close that contract and I move to the next. Right? That's right. So I mean Isaac's. I'm out here talking about Isaac's song these days, and Isaac's song is a book about ancestral healing, about how do you heal with a person who wounded you, but they're also in eternity, right? What do you do when you're wounded and you're emotionally messed up from a person who you can no longer reach out to and touch? Isaac's song is about how that happened, right? And how and why that's so important to happen. But it's also about something else. Isaac's song is also about the ways in which often, especially between children and parents, between children and grandparents, the ways in which also sometimes a child's memory. Oh, I need that. People online as well. Oh, okay. A child's memory is never accurate, right? When we think we're remembering the way our parents treated us, we're not really remembering the way our parents treated us. We're remembering the way we felt about it as a child, right? So we have to be careful not to take memory as history, right? And so Isaac's song is about the ways in which this young man named Isaac actually grows up and becomes an adult and realizes that the father he thought he hated, that father actually adored him. But adoration changes forms, right? And so it's about him coming to terms with his own father and his father's love for him, right? In ways that he never, ever thought about. For example, when Isaac is about 5, I think, Isaac tells his father that he wants to play the piano. Isaac, this is the 1960s. Isaac comes from very poor people. His father was a farmer, rural Arkansas, et cetera. And his father was a poor man. And Isaac tells his dad that he wants to play the piano. He saw this guy playing the piano. And Isaac's father says, "Boy, are you sure you want to do that?" And he says, "Yes, Daddy, I want to play the piano." So his father buys a piano, right? But he puts it on layaway for 2.5 years, right? Y'all remember layaway? Some of y'all are old enough. Okay. If you're younger than 30, don't worry about that image. Don't worry about that. Right. He put it on layaway. And by the time he gets the piano off of layaway, Isaac's in the 3rd grade, right? But Isaac comes home one day and the piano is in the living room. And he's like, "Oh my God, the piano, oh my God, there's the piano, right?" And Isaac begins to take piano lessons. Isaac gets maybe 6, 7, well, maybe 8. And Isaac goes to his father and says, "Well, Dad, I mean, I ain't really feeling the piano the way I once was. I mean, I was once feeling it, and it, but I don't really think I want to play the piano anymore." Isaac's father tells him, "Okay, well, what else would you like to do?" And Isaac says, "Well, maybe I want to dance." Isaac was this very creative kid, right? And his father says, "You want to dance? Okay, great. Well, what else might you like to do?" "I think I might like to write." And his father says, "Great. You might dance. You might write. You might do all of those. But mother, let me tell you what else you're going to do. You're going to play this piano. Now, you might also dance. You may also write. But I swear for God, you're going to play this goddamn piano, And it's a funny story, but it's a deep thing. Because Isaac's father is teaching him a very serious lesson, and that is, you do not let an elder sacrifice for you, and you throw that away. You don't get the right to do that, young man. But Isaac thought that was mean as a child. But as a grown person, what pays his bills is Isaac plays the piano, right? So Isaac realizes that there comes a time when you start renegotiating your memory with these elders we had, right? And so this whole book, Isaac's Song, is about him maturing and about him coming to terms with who his elders are and about the ways in which he also still needs to say, but Daddy, there are ways you treated me that were not right, right? See, 2 things can be true at once. Our ancestors can be marvelous and divine, right? And need a little correction. See, both things can be true. Amen, somebody, right? So that's what Isaac's Song is about. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Anyone else? You see the microphone, Black people just get up and just start talking. So,
And we really
need you. Go ahead, ma'am.
We actually don't need you to wait for the microphone because people on Zoom can't hear you.
Oh, okay. We're in this age of technology.
Brother Danny.
Hello, how are
Danny,
you?
How are you?
Fantastic.
You were marvelous as usual.
Thank you, ma'am.
As usual.
Thank you.
As usual. So as we find ourselves in this moment,
Yes.
politically in this moment,
Yes.
talk a little bit about what you think would be the most effective way or ways in which we can really pull our people out of the fire in the midst of this terrible moment
Okay.
we find ourselves.
Since I know we're on Zoom, I'm going to say this a certain kind of way, right? But you'll get it, right? Everybody in this room will get it if you'll just switch over into trickster mode for a minute. All right. Number one, we're really overreacting, right? What did our ancestors do when Lincoln was in office? Who didn't want to free no slaves, right? What did our ancestors do when Johnson was in office, who did not really want to sign the Voting Rights Act? Do you understand what I'm saying? Right, right. In other words, this is not new. This is not new, right? Our shame is that we got shocked because we thought we were done with this, right? Number one. Number two, there's something I think we should use that our ancestors used in the 50s, and that is, I think we should resurrect freedom schools, right? That's a very tangible answer. I think we should gather up Black kids, right, on Saturday mornings between about 9 and noon, right? We should use churches because 90% of churches are empty at that time, right? We already have the spaces in our community. Take the children to those churches and teach those children our history, ourselves, not public schools. We don't need any sanction from the community. We don't need to write grants for it. We already have the knowledge. Take those kids to those churches and by 50 and 60 kids at a time and teach those children our history. And don't give them the option not to come. That's my answer. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You were wonderful.
Thank you, ma'am.
I didn't really want to say anything, but because of Sister Johnette, I have to. My name's Renata Yarborough Sanders,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
a lot of people here know me as a genealogist,
Yes, ma'am.
as a speaker, a teacher,
Mhm.
a blogger, all kinds of these different things. But I don't think anyone in here knows me as a writer,
Mm,
and I am a writer.
wow.
I've always been a writer
Wow.
since I was very young. The only public recognition I've ever gotten was I was published in an anthology when I was in junior high school.
Hmm.
That was it. But I wrote only one note, and I wrote in quotes, "This is why I write,
Yes.
Dr. Daniel Black."
Wow.
And under it, in parentheses, I wrote, "I have to write."
You have to write.
And so you've inspired me. And there was maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, and a writing contest that the Daily Press does. And somebody who got honorable mention wrote a piece called "I Have to Write Again."
Oh, wow.
Now, that was the last time I was this inspired and this motivated to start. I still write, I just don't share anything.
Yes, ma'am.
And so that piece has been on my refrigerator, cut out of the actual newspaper. So it may have even been longer ago because I haven't had a paper subscription in a while.
Yes.
And it's been on my refrigerator. I see it every day. And I know I need to write because the voice is in me.
Yes.
And, people will sometimes see my blog posts and say, "Oh, you're such a good writer." But I'm like, y'all don't know. I have poems, I have prose, I have short,
Well, the reason we don't know is
everything.
because you haven't shared it with
Because I'm
us.
not sharing it. So thank you, because the impact you had on
Oh,
me
man. Yes, ma'am.
makes me know that I could be having that impact
Absolutely.
also. So thank you. I have to write
absolutely.
again.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I want to tell you this too, ma'am. Yes, just get it out there, and don't be afraid of people knowing your business. Right? A writer is really someone I teach students. If you're going to write, you have to be unafraid of nakedness. You've got to be able to. It's a metaphor, of course. You got to be able to literally. Right. That's why we on Zoom. See, y'all got it, didn't you? Right. You have to be able to metaphorically walk around the world absolutely naked and let people look however they want to look, right? And you just stand there. That's a writer. See, anything you're willing to cover up will inhibit your voice, right? You have to absolutely be free. And so, so ma'am, get free. So I look forward in a minute to going into the bookstore and finding your name on the book, and I'll be glad to buy it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Black, thank you so much.
Yes,
You're
ma'am.
a Ward from Norfolk State University.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and I'm also a Temple Owl. So
Yeah.
you mentioned the Black arts movement.
Yes.
You also mentioned multiple times about the role of dance.
Yes.
And Norfolk State University Dance Theater will also be here moving to Valerie Winsborn's words. She's going to be presenting.
Wonderful.
And I would like for you, since you have this audience, to just talk about the role of the cultural arts, the dance arts in particularly, inviting the spirits in, speaking, social emotional healing, all of those things, because we often face pushback, particularly when it's African diaspora dance in academia.
Sure.
There tends to be this created or made up or false narrative about a hierarchy in dance
Sure.
that we
Yes, ma'am.
totally reject. So if you
Yes,
could speak to that, thank you.
Absolutely. The thing I want to say actually is most people approach the arts incorrectly, right? Too many people approach the arts as if the goal is their entertainment, right? That's the first problem. The second problem is that for Black people, particularly in America, not only is the arts not entertainment, but the arts is really the place where the battle happens, because we were not invited into most other academic arenas and places in America. So the music, the dance, see, those were the things we could do. And so those were the places that we mastered. See, if you're going to know Black people, there's no autobiography of Black people. If you're going to know Black people, you got to go to the spiritual. If you're going to know Black people, you got to go to jazz. If you want to know Black people, you must know James Cleveland. See, if you don't understand, right, Black people's love of the metaphor, right, in peace be still, right? If one doesn't understand the ways in which Black people sing about heaven, right, then one never gets Black people. And the beauty of dance particularly is, this is one of the reasons why if you go see Alvin Ailey, they're going to do Revelation every time. But it's not because they just love Revelation. In fact, most of them probably hate it by now. But the sensibility of Black people demands it, right? Because the minute they start dancing Revelation, the ancestors ooze up, right? Because what dance is really doing is, dance is speaking what our mouths cannot say. Dance is bold enough, right, to say out loud what's too dangerous for the rest of us ever to speak, right? And that's why dance is so absolutely important, because it talks in the silent spaces. Ma'am, don't get me started this morning. Golly, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. Y'all got me sweating, right? But it's extremely important. And this is why even our kids dance. This is why hip hop is so important. This is why even little Black kids are always in movement, right? You always see little Black that's up, because dance is, the ancestors speak through dance, right? And so movement really is the way that people have learned to stay alive in a place that has been committed to their destruction. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good now.
Yes, ma'am.
I just like to thank you. I feel like I was in revival, being
Yes,
a
ma'am.
Baptist.
Oh, wow.
I've been, with our history and reading and learning
Yes,
more and
yes,
more and more.
Yes.
Your soul get connected, and you also get a little bit feelings, angry,
Yes.
and all of that stuff.
Yes, ma'am.
And I never thought, I kept saying, I can't wait for revival around here in the churches. But thank you this morning. You have revived my soul, my spirit.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
my
Wow.
mind. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. I'm so happy to be here. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, sister. How you doing?
You know I'm good. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Ooh. Hmm.
Mm.
Thank you. I look at the long lineage of the people who have come before me
Yes.
that you are calling out
Yes.
to, right?
Yes.
But as a young person, I have questions.
Yes.
because I look around and I see that this place fights us,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Place does not love us.
Sure.
And I tell my mom gets frustrated because I say, I don't want to keep fighting a place that doesn't want me to fight for it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I'm also of the age where I'm looking like, do I want to have children in a place like this?
Uh-huh.
When I want small Black children, I was an educator. I was a
Yes.
teacher.
Yes.
I loved my students. I love my babies to
Yes.
death. I couldn't keep watching. So then I think and I look and I've said, to put it bluntly, this place doesn't deserve any more tears or blood. It doesn't deserve it. Sorry. And let me hold the rage and the love too.
Uh-huh. Absolutely.
So then my question is, how does one move forward, right? For the young people, the people who want to have
got you.
kids someday, right?
I got you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, I know what you mean.
I'm sorry, I'm not so eloquent.
No, and I understand your question because I see it in your eyes, right? I get your question. And I want you to listen to me very carefully. If you're not careful, my sister, you're giving your power away. You're giving your strength away, right? Here's what I mean. Have you ever, as a child, gone outside and disturbed an anthill? You know, we've all probably done that, right? And have you ever noticed that the second you disturb it, the ants start rebuilding it? You ever notice that? You could leave and come back an hour later and disturb it again, and they'd rebuild it, right? Look, they never look up at you. They're never concerned with who disturbed it because their ability to rebuild it is greater than your ability to disturb it. And they know that. You'll get tired of disturbing it before they get tired of rebuilding it. Right? Which means, sister, you are the ant. But be very careful of thinking that the ant will lose because the ant is small. The ant is something that the giant is not, and that is resilient, right? All of us have destroyed ant hills, and the ants prosper. They are everywhere. We can never get rid of them. Because what the ants know is that you're not consistent. I'm saying something if you get with what I'm saying, right? And should you have children? Absolutely. Because if you don't have them, we won't get another Nat Turner. If you don't have them, we won't get another Shirley Chisholm. If you don't have them, James Baldwin can't come again. You understand what I'm saying? Be careful of thinking you want to birth children into some excellence, into some perfect world. No, the excellence the children will have is what you hand them. Right? If black people wondered, oh, is this world safe enough to birth children? We would have birthed no kids, no time. You understand what I'm saying to you?
Do.
And as much as your love will cover your kids in more than any power structure could ever possibly harm them. You understand what I'm saying? So what I'm saying to you is, as long as you remember that you're the ant, as long as you remember that, ma'am, you're good. Because where do the ants go when the snow falls? You know what? We don't know. Because we're not looking for them. That's the key. That's the key, right? On December 31st, 1862, black people huddled all over this land, waiting to see if Lincoln was going to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. Black people now call that watch night, right? Now, maybe white people have watch night. I don't know. Do white people have watch? I don't know. Right? I've never been to a white church that had watch night. Right? But I understand it, right? Because black folks was watching for something. Right? And I'm saying this because Lincoln did sign it. But if Lincoln hadn't, our freedom was coming anyway. Right? Why? Because the ants had done the work to make that happen. I'm going to tell you one other thing, sister. Slavery ends roughly legally 1863, 1865, blah, 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 right? Most black colleges, HBCUs, are founded within about 4 or 5 years from the end of slavery, right? How the hell did thousands of Black kids go to college who 5 years earlier were enslaved. How did that happen? I didn't say go to kindergarten. Does somebody understand what I'm asking? How did they fill up Black colleges? And I thought Black people couldn't read. See, that's the narrative we've been told. Somewhere there's a lie in here somewhere. Because again, it's not kindergarten. How did people go to college and just a few years ago, their parents were enslaved? Because somebody has not told the story right. Right? Our job is to get the story right. That's what the Lemon Project is here to do. Get the story right. And it matters. It matters. It matters. And your job is to keep loving those babies and to know that who you are is greater than anything that will ever come against you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Where we at? How much time we got? Okay. They said all day. We don't have all day.
So,
Hello. Yes, ma'am.
over here, yes.
Oh, here? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
When I was on my way down here, when I woke up this morning,
Yes, ma'am.
the ancestors had been on my mind.
Uh-huh.
And as they were reading your bio, they said Temple University.
Yes.
And one particular ancestor is Dr. Jeffrey L. Woodyard.
Oh my God.
He was my African studies professor.
No way.
And it's got me thinking about the fact that as much as he impacted my life, I don't know that I'd ever met anyone else who knew him other than the people who were in class with me.
Oh my gosh.
So it's got me thinking about community. And I'm wondering if there are particular ancestors, elders, community that, from a family historian perspective, right? Who
Sure.
were the people who poured into you?
Yes.
And is there an ancestor that you would like to bring forth this morning?
You're going to really, I don't know if you knew this, but Jeffrey and I were best friends.
Stop it. Stop it.
Jeffrey,
Stop it.
I have all the pictures of us together at Temple, getting our PhDs together. Jeffrey and I partied. Oh my God. Jeffrey would leave campus and drive to Harrisburg and to go to school and teach. And he'd come back and he'd stay with me. Right? When he'd come to Philly. I feel like I'm almost in a time warp here for a minute. Right? I know Jeffrey unbelievably well. Right? So I have to get your number. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Wow. So people who influenced me. Wow. When I was 15 years old, I was a very good student in high school. I was in rural Arkansas. And I had a white teacher, a white woman named Ann Crowfoot. And she was a hell of an English teacher. Oh my gosh, she was just extraordinary. I was in what they called back then the accelerated class. Y'all, most of y'all were in these classes, right? The gifted and talented. What do they call it now? What do they call it? We were in the tracking. Y'all understand, right? And so I was in there. It was a room full of white kids and me. And she came to me one day and she said, I could get fired for what I'm about to do, but I'm going to take a risk, Daniel Black. And I said, okay, yes, ma'am. She said, you're really, really an amazing thinker, an amazing writer, but you don't know enough about Black people. This was a white woman. This is really true. This is really true, right? And she said, and I want to give you a book. I was a fastidious reader then. She said, I want to give you a book, and I want you to read this book, and I want you to tell me what you think about it. She said, we're not supposed to buy gifts for students, especially those in our classes, et cetera, but I'm going to give you this book. I want you to just keep this between us, but I think it's important that you have it. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, you've probably never heard of this writer, but I think it could make a difference. She gave me a book called If Beale Street Could Talk, right? By James Baldwin. I'd never heard of James Baldwin, never heard, right? I took that book and I went to the barn where I live. I read that book in probably 48 hours. And I said, a black man wrote this? So I went back to her and I said, Miss Crowfoot, a black man wrote this? And she said, just like you. I'll never forget it. I will absolutely never forget it, right? And when I finished that book, I knew I'd write one day. I said, I've got to do this. I mean, the way he turned these phrases, I remember reading the book and going, ooh, just because I had just never seen sentence structures, right, that just sang like music, And so Anne Crowfoot is one person who absolutely, positively influenced me. She's in the ancestral realm now. But when I published my first novel, she drove from rural Arkansas to Atlanta to be at the book release celebration. Right? Yeah, awesome. My dissertation advisor is a woman named Sonia Sanchez. Right? Yes. So y'all have heard of her, right? To say she was a hell of a teacher is such an understatement. Now, if you want to see a performance, I mean, every time she taught, it was a performance. She would read and you just be weeping and you don't even know you're weeping, right? And she'd say, why aren't you taking notes? Why aren't you taking notes? We like, ma'am, can't nobody write while you doing this? And she was amazing. And she did she did a poem called The Coming, right? From which I took the title, right, of the book, right? And I'll never forget when she finished that poem, I felt like I knew ancestors at that point, right? So Sonia Sanchez, certainly. Malefia Sante, these are all teachers I had in graduate school, right? I'm a big Baldwin fan, certainly. I would also say the Black church in general, right? Because the Black church has problems for sure. The Black church needs an overhaul theologically for sure. But I don't know any other institution in America that is the keeper of the Black aesthetic like the Black church. I don't know any other institution where a child can learn confidence and self-worth the way the Black church used to teach it. We called it Easter speeches, right? Some of y'all get it, right? Where you had to stand, and you were going to do it, right? You had to stand up in front of the church. Jesus rose today. Jesus is coming your way, Yeah, somebody remembers this. And they say, yes, baby, yes. Right. But what people don't know is this is how Martin Luther King started, right? This is how Fannie Lou Hamer started. Oh, God help. This is how Shirley you understand what I'm saying, right? That notion of teaching children that if you're going to be Black in America, you have to be able to speak truth to power, right? And so I'm appreciative for what the Black church has taught me. I just want us now to give racist theology back. Yes, ma'am. So I'll finish there. Is that more? Yes, ma'am. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good
Oh,
afternoon.
sorry, it's good morning.
Morning.
My name is Vina Samadi. But when you were talking about the name thing, it made
Yes.
me giggle because my real name is actually Chinazom. Because I grew up in Nigeria.
Yes.
But the reason I stood up today to ask you this question is because initially I was thinking about, as a law student, we often face like a very difficult like space where, especially in Williamsburg, there's kind of this, I feel like Black history is quite obscure in our studies, whereas when I was at Howard, Black history and like, revisionist history and decolonization work was always centered in the discourse.
Sure.
And so I wanted to ask you, sort of what are your thoughts on like decolonization from a legal perspective, or from like what you see like young lawyers could get involved with for our people? That's kind of my question. And do you also see distractions that you feel like is impeding in some ways some of the work that could be done? But I guess my more important question is back to that decolonization framework. Like, what
Sure.
do you see the work that, because for me, like I grew up in Nigeria, so a lot of things I think about is like, how do we actually extend a lot of the work that's being done back to the continent in reference to, I think a lot about statehood creation, post-independence,
Sure.
sovereignty for a lot of indigenous groups that honestly are just kind of folded into these massive states, but just kind of reaching deeper into our like indigenous lineage and stuff like that. What are
Sure.
your thoughts on those kind of discourses?
Yes. The first thing I'll say is, are you surprised that you're not getting that here?
I'm not surprised.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Just wanted to like.
Okay. Yeah, okay. You said Howard had it. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Right? Because if you want a good steak, I don't know that you go to TGI Fridays. And this is very important because if you're not careful, if you're not very, very careful, right, you're begging the oppressor to free you, right? But that's not the oppressor's job. Your job is to construct your own freedom, right? But it doesn't mean you're not supposed to be here. You're absolutely supposed to be here. Get the law degree. Get it. Right, get it. Then get with some like-minded folks and create a law firm, right, that fights on behalf of what you believe in and what you love, right? But don't pray that the law school is going to offer a class, right, called, how to free Black women in the legal system. You know what I mean? Listen, I don't teach here, so I can say this and go to the house. You know what I mean? But this is important. Don't do that. Don't do that because it's really a waste of your energy, right? But you need the law degree. The other thing that's very important is remember this: the law was never made to free Black people, right? That's extremely important. So you're going to run into laws, you're going to run into cases, you're going to run into situations like, no, this doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't, right? That's not fodder for you to fight with the professor. What you say is, oh, okay, right? Because I'm going to tell you something I've been teaching my students. I'm teaching a class this semester called Slave Revolts. Now, first of all, Clark knew better than to give me this class, right? The class is packed. It's so many. It's 30 people enrolled, and it's this many people in the room. You know what I mean? But what's been so wonderful that I've seen is every time Black people agitate, there is a new law, right? When slaves would revolt, all of a sudden now there's a convening of Congress, right? So the Negro Act of 1740, then the Seaman Act of such and such. There are always some acts. Oh, damn. Let's not teach them to read no more. Because it's these reading people who keep leading these rebellions. Oh, that's our problem. So let's get the Congress. Oh, wait a minute. No, you can't trace. These children of slave masters are suing for their freedom. God dog it. No, but that's because in America, a child's lineage is through its father. We got to make it through its mother. Convening of Congress, So what I'm saying here is be careful, right, of conceding unto the law a kind of nebulous divinity, right? It does not have that, and you don't need it to. What you need to know is how folks conceive of it so you can learn the magical dance, right, of how to renegotiate it. Your inheritance is the trickster, right? You've got to know how to do the trick around the legal system. The legal system is large, but it ain't God. Right.
Okay.
What's that?
Dr. Black.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
We have someone who's texted in to a friend who has a question for you.
Are they online?
No.
Oh, okay. They just on the phone. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right, I'm with you.
She's 94 years old.
Wow.
And she wants to know how to get involved in the revolution.
Oh my God. Okay, this is my answer to her. Text her and tell her to find all the children she can find and tell them her story. If you lived a whole century, if you lived a whole century, the revolution is in you. Anybody who's been here 100 years has seen more than most of us could imagine. But don't leave here with that story. Give it away. Find every child you can find and tell that story.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think that's going to have to be the last question.
to-
Dr. Black is going to go out and he's going to be signing books.
Okay.
But
Thank
he
you all.
has
I
to
love
leave.
you all. Thank y'all tremendously. Have a great conference. Wait, no.